Ostensibly today, I'm talking about transgenderism, but consideration of that has led me to the wider question of what makes us us, and the narratives we tell ourselves in order to belong. As a British black actress, whenever I'm asked the question, how do we make drama more reflective of the diverse range of cultural experience? I always say, get in a culturally diverse range of commissioning editors. Seems fairly obvious to me. We all love to see stories about ourselves that reflect our own narratives. Why do we think that the commissioning editors who green-light the publishing and broadcasting of the stories we see, hear, and read, why do we think they would be any different? There is a reason for the preponderance of dramas about middle-aged, middle-class, white male concerns. So this is a sweeping and a not particularly original generalization, I know, but I would contend that nevertheless it is a true one. And yet, how does this notion that we all love to see stories about ourselves square with the stories that we watch that, having no apparent connection to our own lives, still hit us in the solar plexus and break our hearts? They're nothing to do with our lives, and still they move us profoundly. For beyond the individual identification with a story, there is the universal identification that humans the world over recognize. Stories about the need for joy, for companionship, for encouragement, for safety, for food, for shelter, the giving or withholding of love, the yearning for peace, and yet the thrill of discovery common to us all. Why are these stories common, regardless of our backgrounds and our circumstances? I ask this not as the philosophical perambulations of an actress between jobs, but as the mother of an 18-year-old transgender son. I'm curious about what these universal responses really say about our universality as a species. Why do we let outward signifiers, appearance, wealth, education, social hierarchy, why do we let them determine the way we are regarded and responded to before any assessment or interaction has taken place with our character? Where is that Martin Luther King, I have a dream ambition of judging a person solely according to the content of their character? So I'm sitting in London on the Victoria Line tube train, the underground, the metro, whatever you call it. I'm sharing these thoughts with my 18-year-old son, and he raises the idea of substance dualism. So, substance dualism. This is an idea developed by the 16th century French philosopher René Descartes. It's an idea that posits that the mind and the brain are two separate entities. Thank you, school AS-level religious studies. An idea of great interest to both of us, and perhaps the reason why my son is no longer in education, did not complete those AS-level studies, and like many bright, articulate, transgender young adults, has fallen out of education completely. My son is a walking manifestation of substance dualism, of that looking out at a reflection of himself and seeing a girl's body staring back at him. An image his brain reports as faithful, but his mind, knowing it to be the wrong image, revolts against. A mind trapped in the wrong body. So as a family, we are following our son's mind and are bearing witness to the truth of his mind's assertion that he is indeed a boy. A boy in his behavior and tastes from earliest childhood. From his consistent appearance as a football-mad Superman or Spider-Man wearing adventurer, endlessly cartooning, constructing complex Lego transformers, sleeping beneath outer space duvets, to his charging about with our neighbours' sons like the fictional Just William and his gang of outlaws. But when puberty hit, we lost him. Of female gender at birth, our tomboy daughter had always been the son we'd never had. Only we'd had him all along and we hadn't realized it. At puberty, his sense of loss, of loneliness and isolation were heartbreaking to witness. Our son thought he was going mad, and his father and I were at our wits' end. He was so profoundly sad. So the narrative of his life became clearer to him after much searching when he finally alighted on the UK Channel 4 documentary, The Boy Who Was Born a Girl. Thank you to the internet, thank you to Channel 4. Now at last he had the language for what he had always felt to be maddeningly his truth. He knew himself to be just that, a boy who had been born a girl. It's hard to absorb the knowledge that your child, your beautiful, bold daughter, is telling you that she is leaving, and that to honor her truth, to have that thriving child that all willing parents long for, you must grope your way forward into the unknown of this new child, guided by his fragile instinct, not your maternal instinct, his fragile instinct. It's a frightening thing. But as parents, sisters, godparents, and wider friends and family, this is our commitment, made in love and trust and faith in our son's overpowering certainty that he is a boy, a young man, desperately trying to find his way into the life he knows that he was born to. And fortunately for us, it's 2014, and we and he are amazingly well supported in many ways. The day I took him to his first gendered intelligence meeting, Gendered Intelligence is an organization run for young adults between the ages of 13 and 25 who are facing challenges around their gender identity. That day he was silent and rigid with anxiety, and so was I. What if it wasn't the promised land? My son still had his girl's name, and we had no idea what to expect. I mean, who were these people? But after half an hour, as the young people trooped in, I could have wept. For there in front of me was a room full of children just like my son, like the ugly duckling who turned out to be a swan. My son had found his people. Now, the founders of GI, a transgender man and his wife, are creative people, and they approach the trans challenges creatively. Arts projects and filmmaking provide ways of allowing young trans people to express themselves in a way that they probably have never dared to share before. They hire swimming baths so that they can swim freely. If you are in the wrong body, why would you want to put that wrong body on public display in a public swimming pool? They provide camping trips, sports opportunities, posture and voice classes, and the freedom to drop your guard, to be yourself in a non-hostile, welcoming environment, and all much needed. Because according to a recent Youth Chances report, the reality is 72% of trans young people self-harm. Many, like my son, fall out of education, and the levels of unemployment and transphobic bullying and violence against them are high. In the UK, the Crown Prosecution Service has launched a pack to help teachers in school tackle LGBT hate crime. Their research tells them, this is the Crown Prosecution Service, their research tells them that those who will go on to commit serious hate crimes in later life will have held transphobic beliefs at school. When our son's bewildered girls' school were still insistent on his wearing the regulation school skirt, even during his crucial exams, we finally argued back. Imagine you are sending your husband to work in a regulation school skirt every day. Or imagine your skirted son waiting at the bus stop with other teenagers at 7:30 in the morning. Imagine them running that gauntlet every day. and then ask that husband or son to work or study diligently and engage in successful and enriching social interactions in their skirt. The school began to understand, and our son wore his tracksuit to his exams. So there is work to do. At the same time, there are shifts and awakenings in the cultural and scientific discourse which I hope will expand our understandings of the real complexities of who we are as people. The journalist Laura Penny recently wrote in the New Statesman magazine, "Centuries of marginalization mean the statistics are still shaky, but it is estimated that between 0.1 and 5% of the population of Earth is trans, genderqueer, or intersex. Whichever way you slice it, it's millions of human beings." In a moving article in the Guardian newspaper this summer, a young transgender man writes about traveling with his mum to have top surgery, that's a double mastectomy, in Florida, and his sense, once he had regained a masculine chest, of having been fixed, of having been returned to his childhood expectation of what his adulthood would look like. And let's not forget African-American trans actress Laverne Cox in HBO's hit series Orange is the New Black, or Frank Maloney, internationally renowned boxing promoter Frank Maloney, who now, at 61, as Kelly Maloney, is discovering what it is to live as the woman she always knew she was, even as a boxing promoter. So, a transgender tipping point, as Time magazine asked recently? Hardly. But it's a beginning, certainly. Now, I live in London with my family, and so we have access to adolescent specialist psychotherapists, to gendered intelligence, and to the National Health Service's Gender Identity Development Services. I am aware of the privileged provision, and I wonder at my son's reception had he been born in another region of the United Kingdom, or in his grandfather's country, Ghana, or had he been born to parents unable to cope with or respond to the truth of who he is. What would have happened to my boy? What is happening to boys and girls across the world, and men and women? And so I return to the question, what makes us, us? Because if my son feels to me, in essence, as he always has throughout his 18 years, if the vibration of all that he brings to my life and to the lives of others around him remains unchanged, even as his body, through design, medical and psychotherapeutic support, is fundamentally transforming, then what does the essence of a person amount to? I am struck by the undeniable sameness of my child. The same sweetness, the same quirky sense of humor, the same stubbornness, the same hideous, dank teenage bedroom. Why, if there is a universal essence that we all retain, my me-ness, your you-ness, why do we hold on to the external differences that diminish and divide us? Why? I wonder at the plasticity of the brain. Did you know that the human brain grows at 1% a day for the first 90 days of life, with neurons firing and wiring continuously? That firing and wiring is programmed by evolution to develop from the inside in response to genetics, but also is programmed to develop from the outside in response to nurturing and the environment. Babies acquire language and understanding of themselves and the world around them through good engagement of their parents, their carers, and their communities. Go onto YouTube and look at the still face work of Dr. Edward Tronick to see just how much the young brain responds to that environment and nurturing. Babies are taught physical function, ways of thinking, belief systems through drill and repetition, until those become the cultural narratives and norms that we live by as a society. Could we drill and repeat ourselves into a cultural norm where judgment of a person is reserved until they are known. What would that feel like? Imagine if we were colourless, classless, tribeless, genderless, or if such so-called markers of belonging were genuinely meaningless. Think about the impact on leadership, on power, on social infrastructure. Goodbye racial profiling. Goodbye glass ceiling. Goodbye having to man up. How would it be to live in a world where all responses were individuated to the person? What would it do to the speed at which we live? To domestic violence, to reproduction, sexuality, sporting structures, department stores, life chances. In Germany, there are 3 legal genders at birth recognized now. In India, in Bangladesh, in Australia, New Zealand, Nepal, Pakistan, 3. Girl, intersex, boy. One day, I believe we may understand the myriad degrees of gender to be so nuanced, 3 genders will look like a joke. One day, perhaps, we will fall in love with people in new ways, raise our children in new ways, hire and fire and work and create and discover and entertain in new ways. One day, perhaps, we will not look at the color of a person, or the swellings beneath their clothing, or the trappings of their status, and make any judgment about them at all until we have engaged with them individually, until we have engaged with the content of their character. I ache for that one day, today. This is not a utopian dream. It is a lived reality that my son needs, and I believe many of us need. I want us to understand that this now is not the only reality. For us to understand that this now is simply the socio-political economic model that fuels the rules of engagement we currently live by in order to fuel the transactions of global power and capital. I would argue that perhaps these rules have no bearing whatsoever on our true essence. We have been raised to fit the rules, to jump the hoops, to supply the market. Who we really are, who we really feel ourselves to be, most of us will never even have the opportunity to discover, certainly not to embrace. We're just starting to catch up, to understand more about our world. Look at that Easter Island talk. Let's take time to do that essential discovering, rather than making the world fit our limited understanding, rather than making ourselves fit that limited understanding. Let's not continue as we are, where every baby born with unimaginable capabilities to engage richly with this wonderful world is shut down almost instantly by the immediate limitations we place on them at birth. I long for us all, and for all our babies, to breathe freely into the whole of who we are, to look at our reflections and truly see ourselves, so that we can be released into a life of joy, love, fulfillment, and peace. And girl, intersex, or boy, I delight in my son.